Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. You are here for day one of Back to School Boot Camp. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Marnie Ginsberg with Reading Simplified. And we're going to talk about blending problems. That's what day one is about today. This isn't something that we talk about at cocktail parties, and most of our friends and our spouses and family don't probably care too much about blending problems. But if you're a kindergarten teacher or you teach students who are struggling, you encounter the blending problem. So I have a solution for you. In fact, it's surprisingly easy. I've been talking about it lately here on our Facebook page at Reading Simplified, but I think you'll learn a few more tips if you've been following along, and if you haven't, then great. Let me ask you to get us kicked off. What blending problems do you encounter? Go ahead and comment with what blending problems you see. Hey, Gabriella, I'm so glad you're here. Describe a blending problem that you encounter with your beginning readers or your struggling or striving readers. And that will be a good kickoff for figuring out a solution, okay? We are going live for the next 4 weeks here at facebook.com/Reading Simplified every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern with a few solutions to common back-to-school problems that you face when you're teaching kids how to read. This tonight and next week are especially vital for kindergarten teachers, but the strategies actually apply for kids of all ages. I used this strategy that I'm going to tell you about recently. I used this strategy that I'm going to tell you about soon recently with a 4th grader who was actually above grade level in some measures, but some of the measures, particularly blending, she wasn't. So we worked through the same activity, the same strategy that I'm going to show you. Let me know, if you're just popping in, what kind of blending problems you see. Your kindergarten student, your struggling readers, your striving readers, when they're trying to read a new word, what do they do? What are the quirks that you see? There's a lot of different things that kids do, but generally there's about 2 or 3 classic things that flub them up. And then as a classroom teacher or as a homeschool parent, you wonder, what am I supposed to do? Should I just give them the word? How do they get over that blending problem? So what are the blending problems that you see with your students? And by the way, if you think that this would be helpful for some of your colleagues or friends, please share this live so we can get a wider audience to tackle this problem, because it is a universal problem. I've been teaching reading for 20 years, and I particularly work privately as a reading tutor with kids who are having struggle. And it's invariably one of the main problems they have, and it's one of the quickest things that I can solve. So I know that this information will be helpful for many of you. So think about sharing it out or commenting to a particular friend to tag them so that they can see these tips. So does anybody have a classic blending problem who's here right now? What are the classic blending problems that you see? There's a little delay, possibly, so I'm just going to give you a few more seconds, and then we'll solve the problem of how to deal with the blending problems. Let's see, what are the problems that you encounter with blending? Let's see, if the kid's reading the word sat, and they say s, at, and then they don't know the word. What do? Well, some of the times, this seems funny, but it's kind of common. The last sound that they said, the t in this example, will be the sound that they start their word guess with. So if they said s, at, they might say Tom or tack or just anything that comes to mind that starts with the t sound. Have you seen that problem where they try to blend the word, but instead of starting with the beginning of the word, they start with the last sound? That seems quirky, doesn't it? Well, it's a lot for their brains and their memories to remember, all those separate sounds that don't seem to have any meaning. If I was just to tell you a whole string of letters that are random, o, k, p, t, a, you might not remember them either, and you certainly couldn't make a word because it wasn't a real word. But the reason that we, as successful readers, are able to hear s, n, and think of a word is because we're using a strategy that I want you to teach all of your beginning or struggling readers. So if you're just popping in, I'm asking you to share some classic blending problems that you have seen or you see frequently. What struggles do your beginning or striving readers show when they're trying to blend? And I was just saying that the one of the classics one is saying that sounds and then using that last sound, the as the beginning of the word that they guess. Like instead of saying sun, they might say nut because the last sound in was the first sound out. And so that's not good. There are a couple of other blending problems that I see. They might just guess based on the first sound or two. So they say s, and then they kind of remember the s, so they say sand maybe. Or maybe they just guess something that makes sense in the text, which is admirable, right? We want them to be searching for meaning, but we also need them to connect to the sounds on the page or the sheet or the book. So let me share with you some typical ways that I see reading programs teaching us teachers how to solve the blending problems. And let's critique them for what needs to be critiqued. Okay, let's see if I can pull up a screen. There we go. Hey, it's working, you guys. That's exciting. Can you see that common blending? That's the second one. Let's go back to this one. That's the first common blending strategy. Can you see that? So when kids have this problem, when the program teaches us to do that, what do we do? How are we going to deal with that? So the programs will typically say to tell the kids to try sound, 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 and then guess the word. Okay? So say the word was mat, and they would say, okay, let's say the sounds, kids. T. What word? And the kids who can already read, they get it. The kids who can't and they can't blend, they don't know what to do, right? They say funny things, or they just stare at you like deer in headlights. So the sound word method does work. It works for quite a lot of kids. But the reason it works for a lot of kids is they're actually doing something in their head, which is what I want you to teach those kids who are struggling. The kids who maybe are a little weaker phonemically. In other words, their processing of sounds is a little weaker. So it's hard for them to just hear seemingly random, isolated sounds like t, and hear a word. So even though the sound word approach often works, it won't work for everyone. So what I'm going to recommend to you today is a strategy that works for everyone. And even if you're doing harder, let me show you some examples, harder words like these, maybe you're not in kindergarten, but your kids are, they're well past CVC, but maybe they're struggling with a CCVCC word like stomp. And they can't blend the STO altogether, or they can't blend it all the way to the M, stomp. So with them, if they were doing the sound approach, it would be even harder for the memory to remember all that. More ways to have a breakdown in searching for meaning. So what would the classic reading program tell us to do? They would say s, t, ah, p, and then guess the word. Again, the only kids that can really do that are the ones that were sort of putting the sounds together as they went, which is what I'm going to show you soon. So I put this slide up to point out maybe your kids aren't in kindergarten, and maybe you think you don't have kids with blending problems, but if you see kids read a word like stomp and then they say somp and they look at you kind of funny, or they say stop because they drop this M, that is a blending problem. And you'll even see it when you get to this multi-syllable level. A child will drop out consonant combinations in some chunks because they didn't really put the sounds together, the chunks together, left to right. So this blending problem, it's kind of classic to see it as a teacher for kindergarten kids, but kids of all ages who still aren't highly fluent and super successful readers will still hit some walls with their blending, particularly with the sound word approach. So I recommend that you do not use the sound word approach like this. So instead of having the kids say sun, we're going to do something different. But the good news is it's super easy. This seems easy, but what I have is even easier, and it will make faster progress. So then what is the other common strategy that we're recommended to teach? We're often taught to have the kids look at the onset or the beginning sound or sounds of the word and then put the rhyme, the ending chunk together like this. Okay, what's the first sound? S. And what's this last chunk? Un. Now put s, un together. What that has us do is jump from the beginning of the word, the eyes of the reader jump from the beginning of the word to the end prematurely, and they jump around like this, which is not what we want our kids' eyes to do. We want their eyes to stream very smoothly across the page, or as smoothly as possible across the page. And another example of the onset rhyme would be st, un, stun. Again, will it work? And has it worked? Yes, it's probably worked for hundreds of thousands of kids, maybe millions. But do you have kids who don't get it when you do this or when you do the sound word method? If you do, then you might want to stick around for the strategy that I'm going to teach you. Another reason that the onset rhyme approach doesn't work for everyone is that it doesn't show the true phonemic or individual sound nature of our code. For instance, a kid will often look at the ST and think S. In other words, they collapse one two-letter combination and turn it into one. I see this all the time, a majority of the time with my struggling readers who are 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade and above. They will look at a word like broken, and they will say boken. And they're like, that's not a word. Because in their mind, B and BR are too linked because we taught them to link them. We need to teach them to unlink them because they're separate sounds. Similarly, they may look at a word like black and say back because they just skip over that because they have been taught to sort of look in sweeping large chunks. And sweeping large chunks is good for mature readers, but it's not good for developing readers who are learning how sounds and symbols match up. So those are the two most common blending strategies that we are told will work for kids. And as I said before, they do work in a lot of cases, but they're not solving the problem for everyone. So I like to teach a strategy that works for everyone. And I don't find that it takes more than a few minutes or days and at the most a week to kind of have serious success and serious forward momentum with this strategy. So what is this strategy? Have any of you followed along here with me at Reading Simplified? You might already know what it is. If you do, type it in the chat. That'll be fun. I'll give you a little bonus star. So here is the strategy that I recommend. Now, it goes by different names, but I just happen to call it, let's pull it up. I happen to call it Blend As You Read. And this is an image from this blog post, Deceptively Educational blog. So instead of saying for the word bus, s, what word? Or instead of saying us, what word? We actually ask the child to put the first two sounds together. So they look at the B and the U, and we stop them there. In fact, we cover the rest of the word as we coach this strategy. What do those sounds together make? And the child should say ba and hold the sound. You might even say sing the vowel or sing that sound ba, because you can hold vowels for a long time. And then you reveal. Notice how the card is then revealed after the child is saying ba. Then when the S is revealed, it's very easy for the child to tack on that last sound. The hard part is putting those first two sounds together. So that is really all that Blend As You Read is. It is so close to the sound word method, but there's that minor twist that makes a lot of difference, particularly for those who are weak with phonemic awareness or phonological processing, or those who have poor verbal or auditory memories. Because when you get to stomp, those larger 4, 5, and 6 sound words, if you say st, You have to remember 5 things. But if you just put the first 2 together, stomp, you don't have to remember as much. And in fact, from the beginning of the word, you might already figure it out if you were reading this in text. So we want the brain to be searching for meaning, and blending as you read helps do that more quickly because you don't have to wait to get to the end of the word. So that is blend as you read. That's the main strategy that I want to recommend. So it works at multiple levels. If you're down here at the CVC level and the student can't read MOP, then teach them blend as you read. But maybe you're saying, oh, well, my kids can do that, no problem. Well, ask yourself, can they do 4 sound words? Can they do C, C, V, C, where the consonants are at the beginning of the word? Or can they do, 5 sound words like stomp, C, C, V, C, C words? So you can push your students' phonemic blending abilities to the hardest level and use this blend as you read strategy to help develop their skills so that reading unfamiliar words becomes easier and easier for them. So if you have any questions about blend as you read or any experiences doing it, I'd love to hear about it. Pop them into the chat. So let me show you some examples and solve some problems. If you have questions about how these work, then I can address it. So we use that example of MOP. But if you have experience with beginning readers, you might tell me, well, sure, I can tell them to put the first 2 sounds together, like ma, but they can't. They just say ah, over and over again. So how do you solve that problem, right? Have you seen that issue? That's very classic for 4, 5, and 6-year-olds because phonemic awareness, their development of phonemic perception is weak just because they're young. And reading is the best way to teach phonemic processing or phonemic awareness. So they're developing in this area, and they are also new readers. So that's why they may not be able to do it as easily as a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old. So let's say you have covered up the ending sound for mop, and you say to the child, okay, put those 2 sounds together. What do you hear? And they just say, Okay, yes, but can you put them together and make them one sound all together? And they still say, Well, what do? One thing that works a lot is just to model it for them. Not model the whole word, but just model that one part. And then the other trick is to make sure that they do the hard work of copying you so that you're not always doing the work. Okay, well, when I look at this, I see ma. Now you copy me. Everybody on the other end of Facebook, I want to hear you. Ma. And then when you reveal that, pop, it's very easy for them to add that on. You'd be surprised if they can come up with a ma. If they know that at all, they'll be able to blend it together. And if they can't, then you just model that too. But the modeling and then the student copying needs to be withdrawn as soon as possible, maybe within a lesson or 2 lessons, certainly by the end of 2 weeks if you're working with a 3, 4, or 5-year-old. If you're working with a 6-year-old, it shouldn't take a very long at all unless there's some developmental delays. So because this modeling and having them copy kind of gets them over that hurdle. And let me show you what it would look like if you were doing it with a harder word. So yeah, you say, my first graders are good with CBC. That's not an issue. So let's do this word. Will they come across this word from time to time and say stop or stamp or stand because they didn't actually blend the sounds continuously? It happens, right? How many of you have seen that? Give me a little thumbs up if you've seen that problem. So, what do? You do the same thing. You just take it with 2. I'm going to try to solve this lighting problem. This might be a little bit better for you guys. Is that any better? Okay, that's a little bit better. You break it down to 2 sounds. Thanks, Chris. And you get them to put those two together, okay? St. Can you put them together? Now, you try not to do it for them. And if they can't do it, you do the modeling. St. Now you copy me. St. And try not to add that sloppy at the end of your consonants. Try not to say sta, because this isn't going to be it's going to be sta. And so you want to try to make your consonants really short and crisp. St. And okay, now put it with this one. Go back and go st. What's next? St. And hold that. I tap on the vowel and hold that sound. Sta. Everybody in Facebook land, I want you to say it with me. Stamp. Now, if you're on the other end of Facebook and you don't teach reading, you're probably looking at this and thinking, that's a really crazy lady. She looks ridiculous. But maybe I do. Brittany Malashwani, thank you guys for popping in there. It may look ridiculous, but this is the solution to many, many children's barriers cracking the code. They don't know how to put the sounds together. And when you coach them through this kind of barrier, get them over that hurdle, then the world opens up to them. And it's so exciting to see a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old or a struggling 6, 7, 8-year-old who thought that reading was too hard, probably because they thought it was a guessing game, a game of memorizing symbols, and they didn't realize that there was a sound, a consistent sound symbol connection across words. And once they do that, you're just basically giving them the primary decoding strategy that they need for the rest of their life. So it's a really big deal, even though it's such a small little thing. Okay? Are there any comments or questions about blend as you read? Let me go back to that. That's what I call it. I've seen a couple different names for it. I've seen continuous blending. I've seen continual blending, successive blending. I know that's what Isabel Beck calls it, and she is a professor at the University of Pittsburgh, I believe. So that was Blend as You Read. It is a great solution for getting your kindergarten kids into the code really easily. And if you have older readers, don't just do 3-sound words. Try to push them to 5-sound words and 6-sound words, like strand. How many sounds is that? Yeah, 6 sounds. Okay, and strand. And then you might be asking, well, what about, consonant digraphs? So you can include that too. I would just recommend putting the consonant digraph, which is one sound, sh, in a different color from the rest. And that's a way to help the kids know what they're supposed to blend. So this is the word shop. You would say, okay, let's put those first 2 sounds together. So even though before I had been doing 2 letters, this time we're basing everything on the phoneme or the individual sounds. We're not that concerned about how many letters, because that's pretty irrelevant really for reading. So let's put those first 2 sounds together. What do you have? Everybody, I want to hear you. Shop. And that's it. So this is a way to mark when one sound has more than 1 letter. Okay, I don't use advanced code or long vowels in the beginning. I stick with short vowels when we're learning how to blend, but the same concept applies here. So light is a, it's a 5-letter word, but it's only 3 sounds. So you would cover up this. Put those first 2 sounds together, light. So that concept that one sound can have more than 1 letters, we can support the kids' understanding of it and give them practice seeing it by showing it in a different color. Or maybe by underlining it, like this. Ship. Okay, put the first 2 sounds together in ship. And a card is so amazingly helpful when you're working on a board, or if you're just using a book and the kid's reading along. I like this little notch card because you can really zero in on just like where the word is with the card. So this is a very handy tool for me. My dry erase board and markers, my little card, and a pencils to point to the letters Like, let's see if I can do it. This is the A in day. And this is the ooh in oot. Is that working? It works on my end. I don't know if it works for you. So we're not getting a lot of questions. Maybe you guys are pros. Maybe you're shy. Maybe you can't hear me. Maybe later there will be questions and I'll answer them in this feed. Now, yesterday I taught very similar instruction, but I worked with a student, a rising kindergartner. So if you want to see this, how this works with a real kid, then scroll back into my Facebook feed further down in Reading Simplified, and you'll see me working with a child. Let me show you what she was doing. She was not having trouble at all with CVC. She wasn't even having much trouble with this level, but when we got to words like stomp, where it was the consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant, she needed a little bit more help. So I was there to help her and slow her down and, cover with my card, like so. But she did the work. So that's a pretty cool little example, because you can see a real kid putting this activity or this strategy into play. And sometimes I get the question, well, how long should it take to be able to blend? Well, with this activity, it should not take much more than a day or two with your typically developing child, even one who may be a little behind in reading. So it should not take that long, and it might not even take more than a lesson. It's just a lot of times it's just sort of an aha that the kids have. They just didn't get it. And then you also have to coach them to do this during real reading. Okay, so if you were looking at this is an example where we're doing word work and there's only one word on the board and it seems pretty easy. But you do the same thing, supporting them to see the beginning parts of the word and not see the end, and blend as they read. So in books. And so that's how you get transfer of this skill in books. Now, there is sometimes a problem, especially the young ones, that you model it, they copy you, and they still don't get it. So I have a backup plan for those. So this is only the backup when everything else fails, okay? You don't tell them the word, okay, because they're supposed to blend it. And I'm a bad artist, so I'm just giving you guys something to laugh at. But I'm going to draw 3 pictures, and I'm going to tell my student what these are. We've got snake. See his little forked tongue? Maybe I did make it forked. Sun. And this is a chair. Somebody is sitting. So we've got sit, sun, or snake. Now, I'm going to write a word, and I'm going to ask you to tell me which of those the word is. Okay? Let's get a good pen. Okay, so let's read the word, let's put the sounds together and figure out, is it snake, sun, or sit? Okay, that's the first sound. What is it? Oh, now let's add that second sound. What are those two together? S, and they can't hear it. Oh, let's try sa, and then you reveal the end, sa, and then after having these planted ahead of time, they all figured out, oh, sun. So that's a way to get around a really, really deep-rooted blending problem. Do this a few times, and they'll get the aha, like, oh, I can hear it now. Because when we say we're not actually saying sun, because sun is co-articulated. Those sounds are completely smushed together. That's my technical linguistic term. And they aren't purely, you can't purely isolate them. So there is no real to push together to make sun. If we smushed our recording really fast with and put it together, it would sound something like this, sun. It wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be right, like it wouldn't be the word. So when they can't do it, and we think it seems so easy, well, it's actually kind of natural that they can't do it. It's only easy for us because we have been using this as a mental representation of those sounds for years. That's how becoming a reader teaches you phonemic awareness. The research shows us that phonemic awareness facilitates reading, but it also is developed by reading. So that's just a little interesting side note. So Chris asks, is having a tutoring business to teach kids to read a good thing to do? Will people pay for that? It's absolutely a good thing to do, because I don't know where you are, Chris, but in America, 65% on average, of American fourth graders are not proficient at reading. And we have a long way to go to get kids to be really quick with recognizing words, so they have brain power to think about the meaning of words. So it's definitely a high value activity. It's very gratifying, especially when you work one-on-one, because there's very rarely any behavior problems, and you can get right to business and you move them along really rapidly. With these activities, I get kids to grade level on average in 12 hours, and that's 12 hours of instruction, usually about over 12 weeks, 1 hour a week. It is extraordinarily gratifying. And definitely, oh, you're in Saskatchewan. Okay, so I think your country's reading results are better than ours in the US, but still there's a lot of room to grow. And yes, definitely people will pay for it. Put your sign up in the coffee shops, in the library. When I first got started, I gave free reading talks at the library, just teaching concepts like this, so that people would know that a little bit more about how to learn to read, to teach reading, and then maybe they thought that I knew what I was talking about. And then secondly, there was another point there that you made me think of. Oh, of course. I'm also here to invite you, and if you haven't been on my recent workshops called 3 Activities a Day to Keep Reading Difficulties Away, I want to invite you to attend. So you'll see a link in the post above, and I'll teach this strategy and show you how it really impacts several kids that I've worked with, kindergarten kids, 4th grade kids, rising sophomore in high school. The same activity has served all of those kids. And so as a tutor, I don't have to really stress about which activities I'm going to use. I know that those 3 activities I'm going to teach in that workshop work for so many different ages and stages. But these are activities that I happen to be not in the classroom right now. I have been in the classroom, but I work with a lot of teachers who are in the classroom, and these very same strategies work in the classroom, and I highly recommend them, particularly for small group reading instruction, because you can really get good instructional match. For instance, let's see here. Some kids, a group of kids may need to be reading at the CVC level, and some kids may need to be reading here at the CCVCC level. So you can group them based on how advanced they are phonemically with their segmenting, manipulating, and blending, and use this activity, this strategy of blend as you read. And it's one of 3 activities that I teach that's basically the foundation of Reading Simplified. And I see such good growth with this set of activities for my own practice, but also for a lot of teachers that I work with. So I am hoping that you will find it saves you time, because you won't have to do every activity under the sun, and it will also accelerate your readers. So please consider coming to that workshop. If you've already come, invite a friend, let them know about what you learned, because you can save so many hours of instruction and so many hours of planning if you know that you have 3 activities that you can go to that form the basis of getting kids to become good decoders. So once they become good decoders, word recognition is much easier, and then fluency is much easier, and then comprehension is just a natural outgrowth of that. One of the students that I worked with, I focused on this activity and a couple others that are very decoding based. But after 6 sessions, his comprehension went up 1.5 grade levels. So 6 hours of instruction, but his comprehension went up 1.5 grade levels. Why did that happen? When I really didn't ask him a lot of deep questions. I mean, we read some stuff and we summarized it, but mainly it happened because we solved the foundational problems that he had, which was sound symbol decoding. We worked on where his holes were, which is a universal, almost universal problem with English-speaking students. And once we shored up that weak foundation, he recognized a lot of words. He recognized them more accurately and more fluently, and so his brain was able to do the reasoning that it took for comprehending. So please do come to that workshop if you haven't yet. Invite a friend if you have. Let them know. Share this out, or tag a friend by commenting so other people can find out about this activity. And if you think that it looks so simple and it's not going to make a big difference, I challenge you. Say we're in boot camp, okay? Boot camp's all about being challenged. Go out and find at least one kid and try this particularly who has some sort of reading challenge, and try this activity, this blend as you read approach, and see if it makes a difference and report back. I'd love to know. I'm a researcher at heart. So thanks for tuning in, and I appreciate the thumbs up, and I appreciate if you get a chance to share. And don't forget about that workshop. It's coming up real soon, Thursday night. And if you can't make it, or if you live in South Africa, sign up anyway and you'll get the recording. All right. Good night. Next Tuesday, we'll be here for Back to School Bootcamp Day 2, talking about what to do when kids can't learn the letter sounds fast enough. Take care.